Hello, F2 Fan 5000 here, and we're going to talk about the 2025 Formula 2 Championship, FIA Formula 2, and I want to talk about who could be champion and what are the possibilities. As we can see here, the points tally, the championship standings, we see Leonardo Fornaroli's leading, and when it comes to championship contenders, possibilities, I'm going to talk about the top 7 drivers. I'll start with Arvid Lindblad and Pepe Marti, the two Campos drivers, on 92 points for Lindblad, 97 for Marti. I think they're both a very, very long shot. Mathematically, I think they're still in it. They have to overcome an almost 60 points gap to Fornaroli. Now that's okay, but I think what their problem is not so much the 60 point gap to Fornaroli. The problem is also the almost 30 point gap they have to Alex Dunn in 5th place. So even if hypothetically Leonardo Fornaroli had a dreadful, doesn't mean that the other drivers, Crawford, Verschoor, Browning and Dunn, all they have to do is score decent points and they will still be ahead of Marti and Lindblad. Or if Luke Browning or somebody has some poor run of form, then maybe Fornaroli keeps scoring the points and they have to overhaul Fornaroli. If the gap is 60 points, and it's about 60 points for both drivers of the 4 rounds, they have to outscore Leonardo Fornaroli by 15 points every weekend just to reach where he is. And I think that's a big ask if Fornaroli continues the form he has been on. And even if he hit a poor run of form, the 30 points gap they have to drivers like Dunn, Browning, Verschoor, even if they're banking on 5 drivers basically having a lousy run of form, I think it's highly unlikely, and I think they're both out of contention realistically. Now we're going to talk about the top 5 drivers. These top 5 drivers are the 5 that I think realistically have a chance to win the title. I'm going to talk about the different scenarios and their possibilities of how this driver could win the title. And I think it's a game of consistency, because if you look at Alex Dunn or Luke Browning, they're one on 124 and 125 points. The problem for them is that even if Leonardo Fornaroli has a bad run of form, Jack Crawford might have a great weekend. Or if Jack Crawford has a poor run of form, Fornaroli scoring points, or Richard Verschoor, they have to overhaul 3 drivers. It's one thing to overhaul 1 driver, but when you're trying to overhaul 3 drivers, you're basically banking on 3 drivers struggling. But I suppose Dunn is 13 points in 5th place, is 13 points behind Jack Crawford in 2nd. So now we've seen on occasion that Alex Dunn is quite good at winning feature races, and it's basically bad luck related to disqualifications and penalties that you could say he's lost around 40 points or so because of disqualifications, and that might put him hypothetically in the lead of the championship. But the thing on his side is that we've seen that he knows how to win races. So to me, even though he's 1 point behind Browning, I think he's more likely to put in a race win or 2 between now and the season finale in Yas Marina. And if he wins a couple of wins, 50 points, that puts him in the lead if no one else scored points, which obviously those 4 drivers are going to score points, but how many? I think Alex Dunn, what he really needs to do is aim for the top 3 at the very least, because he's got to think about the super license points, and the top 3 drivers all get the required 40 super license points. But obviously I'm talking about winning this championship here, not just about getting a super license. So, you know, what Dunn has to do, and he's shown that he can do, is have a weekend. Not only does he win the feature race, but he's also competitive in the sprint, so he's taking as many points out of the likes of Fornaroli and Crawford as he can. And Luke Browning, the problem for him, even though he's very consistent, it's just I can't see a world in which Luke Browning is getting feature race wins and the likes of Vashaw, Crawford, Fornaroli and Dunn are not scoring good points. You know, I see that highly less likely, although he has a lot of podiums, as you can see. Even in feature races, his best finish in the feature race twice is second. I suppose the potential is there. Oh no, he's done it as well at Silverstone, so that's done, sorry. So he's got 2 feature race second places. He could win a feature race. I think Alex Dunn is more likely to go and win a race than Luke Browning is. And I think the top 7 drivers, I want to say this as well, I don't really want to talk about it too much, but I think the top 7 drivers are all very capable drivers and should be, I think they're all Formula 1 worthy in some way or another. But at the end of the day, I want to talk about this championship. Yeah, so to me, it's about Luke Browning. He needs to up his game a little bit and get a couple of feature race wins. Otherwise, if by the end of Baku he's still, 30 points behind, no feature race wins, I think it's pretty much game over for him in a really likely shot, right? Now, I've seen before Leonardo Fornaroli couldn't win races, but now he can. He's done it. He's got 3 race wins, including 1 feature race win. He should have won in Monte Carlo. Jack Crawford obviously knows how to win feature races. So does Richard Vashaw. So I think that the fact that they're ahead of Browning puts him out of contention. Luke Browning, least likely driver in the top 5 to take the title. But I want to talk about Richard Vashaw. To me, I know he's a well-known quantity, but to me he's the one that's hardest for me to predict what he'll do. Sometimes Richard Vashaw is absolutely amazing. Other times he is more average. And you never know with Richard Vashaw plus MP what's really happening. I think he's in a good position, but what he needs, he's got to somehow consistently beat Crawford and Fornaroli and fend off Alex Dunn. So the 11 points between him and Alex Dunn are that's easily overturned. And the thing with Vashaw is there's been off weekends, you know. He's still consistent, but not consistent enough, you know. He really needs to be netting those feature race podiums week in, week out. If he's not going to get a podium, at least finish in the top 6 or 7. Get a sprint race podium, get the points ticking over. And he's struggling the last 3 weekends. So for me, for sure, it's a question of consistency. And Richard Vashaw might, I wouldn't be surprised to see him win another feature race. To me, it's the consistency he's going to let him down, because Browning's consistent, Crawford's consistent, Leonardo Fornaroli is, you know, his face is there when next to the word consistency in the dictionary. Alex Dunn, not so much consistent, but he has an ability to score big points over a weekend, to dominate, to get pole, fastest lap, win the feature race. So it's again, it's a question of assure and consistency. And for me, considering he's in third place, he's behind Jack Crawford, and he's behind Fornaroli, and Dunn's not far behind him. I think it's an uphill battle. But, you know, MP have taken drivers such as Felipe Drugovich to the title before. Not very often. I think Drugovich is the only one. Obviously, a very strong team in some series such as Euro Cup 3. But here in F2, they're a good team. Obviously, much better than they used to be. And the other thing for sure is, you know, in the last couple of race weekends, he's been out-qualified by, definitely the last one, he's out-qualified by Goethe. So moving on to Jack Crawford, and to me, it's very simple. It all comes down to qualifying consistency. I've said that a lot about Jack Crawford. His race pace is undeniable. But if you're starting a feature race back in 15th, 18th, we've seen, I think a perfect example was Imola last year, had terrific feature race pace, was coming through the field, but qualified in the last 3 positions or something, like 20th or 21st, and spent the race coming through the field. That's the beginning and end of it right there, and we've seen poor qualifying and a poor weekend from him in Spa-Francorchamps. So how many more race weekends does Jack Crawford have like that? And even when he's on it, is he going to be beating the Invicta of Leonardo Fornaroli? He's the closest and I would say most likely driver to take the fight to Leonardo Fornaroli. Fornaroli himself, what he needs to do is just back up what he's done the last 3 race weekends, netting as many points as he can, qualifying well, and that's about it really. Obviously, I would say Invicta is the best team. I don't want to say that they have the fastest car. This is a spec series, but they are the best team. They took Bortoleto to the title last year. They're absolutely rapid in this configuration with the ground effects F2 cars. They've done a sensational job. And now they've brought the best out of Roman Stanek. I mean, obviously Stanek's been a talented driver. We saw that in F3. But, you know, Triton aren't the best team. I think they're one of the worst teams on the grid. But now he's with Invicta, you can see the difference, right? So Invicta's going to make the difference. But don't think that means they have a faster car. They might have a better setup, or they just might operationally be better. Actually, some of the pit stops or pit strategy is a bit questionable. But overall, I would say Invicta are the best team. And Fornaroli is very professional, but you know, he's not invincible. So he doesn't want to have weekends where he's a bit off the pace and other drivers are winning the feature race, like especially Crawford and Verschoor and Dunn. These 3, I would say especially Crawford and Dunn. I think those 2 drivers are a real threat, and Crawford might have another feature race win in him. He's in very good form. However, he also might have an off weekend, and that's, you know, when Fornaroli's picking up the 4th and the 5th place, you know, scoring 20 points a weekend. You know, Monza is very important for him. I think Baku is the most important race coming up for him. He really has to nail Baku. And if he does, I think it's going to be, I don't want to say straightforward, or it's definitely not easy, but it will be amongst all the drivers, it will be the most straightforward way to just coast home, not coast home, but glide home to the championship, and I think it's his to lose, to be honest, because he has a cushion, he has a buffer. The pressure of driving in front of his home crowd at Monza, I don't know how that's going to affect him. Obviously a very level-headed driver, a mature head on young shoulders. You know, took the title on the last corner of the last lap of the last race last year to win the F3 title. No one really had him on their bingo card at the start of the year. Oh, Fornaroli's going to take the F3 title. I don't think so. But, you know, the thing is, he knows what he has to do. He's a very intelligent driver, but there's a lot of pressure there, I would say. I think no matter what happens in the future, I think it will always raise his stocks if in his first season of F2 he wins the title. And look, as I said, even if he has an off weekend, he has to bag the points. But it'd be good if he can get a couple of feature race wins. I think I'd like to see a driver who wins the title have a few feature race wins under the belt. I think it looks better that way. You know, the other drivers really have an uphill battle, and his battle is not really an uphill one. It's more of a straight line. But to me, the key weekend is Baku, because, you know, Baku is one of those race weekends where everything can go wrong. A lot of opportunistic moves into turn 1, into turn 3, crashes. It's easy to go and crash there, as we've seen. And, you know, I think the upper hand will be with the experienced drivers. So if he can keep his head there, then I think, and can come out with 20 points leading the championship, I think he'll be very hard to beat. Of course, Crawford has more experience, so Crawford's a little bit younger, just a little bit. It's a matter of months, about 6 months, 5 months younger than Fornaroli. But he's another old head on young shoulders, very experienced, but his problem is consistency in qualifying. Verschoor, again, consistency, it's the main thing. You know, the off weekends are going to cost him. Browning, he's very, very consistent, but he needs to be putting just a little bit more out of it. And Alex Dunn is a bit of a firecracker. You know, like, he can go off, but does it go off with a bang or does it explode? I don't you know, like, does he win the feature race? Does he cause a 10-car pile up? Excellent driver, of course, but, you know, that's the thing that might cost him the title. If there's an incident and he's not scoring points, and drivers like Browning and Crawford are, that's going to cost him. If there is interest in him from Formula One, he needs the super license points, and I don't know how many he has currently. I don't remember him winning any or finishing in the top positions in the championships recently. He did finish third, I think, in GB3, but at that time they didn't give points for GB3. So he'll want to finish in the top 3. I think that's easily doable. I think it's, he's got a slightly more uphill battle, but he's more than capable of going up that hill. Browning has to find another gear, and then he might. Verschoor's got the thing about Verschoor, he's had his rough weekends, so if he's inconsistent, he's got his rough weekends out of the way. Maybe the wins are coming. Maybe it's going to propel him into championship contention. Crawford, I really don't know. But yeah, it's up to him to be consistent in qualifying. And Fornaroli, he knows what he has to do. He has to keep just doing what he's been doing. He's been sensational the last 3 race weekends. Even the, pole converted to feature race podium in Austria. In spite of the sprint race crash, that's really good. And, you just look at his form, 8th in the sprint race at Bahrain, 7th in the sprint race at Jeddah, 7th at the sprint race in Imola, 7th in the sprint race at Monte Carlo, 7th in the sprint race at Catalonia. That's 9 points there, minor points that might make the difference in the end of the championship.